my brain just jumped 50 feet ahead, but it was this analogy about and we're back to where we started, which is your mess is your message. Your story is your greatest superpower.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Reinforce the Horse. Today we are here with Christine Dickson, and Christine is a renowned coach and mentor with a passion for helping individuals achieve their deepest dreams and create abundance in their lives. She has a unique talent for guiding people to discover their true potential and believes that everyone has a story worth telling. Christine's approach combines practical guidance with mindset-shifting tools like IEMT and hypnotherapy. She works closely with clients to overcome obstacles, build self-confidence, and develop strategies for achieving their vision. Christine has empowered countless individuals to find clarity, embrace their stories, and create a life filled with abundance and purpose. Christine Dickson, welcome to the Reinforce the Horse podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful. It's funny because now that I think about it, the Reinforce the Horse, right before 5 minutes before we were starting this, I had two mares having a kicking match outside. I had to run and sprint outside to break up a brawl and separate everyone before running back in the house. So, yeah, I guess energies are high for the podcast around here.
Oh, they must be. So much for reinforcing your horse this morning, huh?
Yeah.
So I want to jump right in and ask how you started your work into. Is it safe to say your work is in psychology?
I think that there is a lot. It's a huge helping of psychology, and maybe not from a licensed therapist angle, but more from life lessons and what works and how to help people rewrite their story, rewrite the what is it called, like the narrative around how they see it. Because there was just, I'm trying to think of, I just was doing this with someone around this idea because, you can have something that happened in your life that feels like that was a negative, like that was a trauma, or that wasn't supposed to happen, that was the bad thing. But most of the time there are really beautiful jewels to be mined out of that experience. And if you can tap into that, you can change the way you see it, but you can also connect with other people in a way that without it, you may not have been able to. And I recently heard the phrase, make your mess your message. And I thought that was so on point. It's not always about sharing our story just to share it. A lot of times people will have trepidations about sharing this because there's this idea of being too much or not wanting to look like I'm trying to make it about me. But if you look at how would sharing my story possibly do good? What could I possibly do by sharing this and connecting with other people who may be experiencing the same thing? And how do we build and connect and hold each other up?
That's such a powerful way of seeing the world, and in your profession, helping people view the world through that lens, given so many of us that have gone through traumas, like we often tend to shut that part of us down and resist it or ignore it, or like, oh, that never happened. I'm a happy person. I have a happy life, when there's still a whole lot to still uncover. I'm curious where the horses came into your life in this way.
Well, I've been horse crazy since I was little. I just never had a family that was able to support that, other than maybe once or twice a year I could go to a horse rental place with a friend and go for a trail ride. Or I maybe got sent to summer camp that had horses as part of the camping experience. But there's been a connection since I was little. I still remember the dreams I had when I was a little kid of like ride. It was always very Cinderella-esque. I would be riding through my little town on this like glorious white horse, and everyone would be there and I would be just smiling. But the times in my life where I was in bad situations and the stress and the fear and everything were at the breaking point, I would go find a public stable. And I would it was like my homing device. It just took me, where can I be with horses? And I would go and I would just walk the aisles and pet noses, and it would just ground me. It would bring me back into my body. Anybody with horses knows what I'm talking about. So, the only people that may not would probably be people that have not yet experienced this, but there is just something that is intangible that horses do to our nervous system in regulating, in enveloping. I felt enveloped in a type of cocoon or connection, or something that just made me feel like everything is going to be okay. I just have to put one foot in front of the other. But that was my experience with horses for a long time, until I was able to really get one of my own. But when I read The Tao of Equus by Linda Kahanov, that's when my brain just blew off my shoulders. I was like, this is actually a thing. Like, I didn't know why I was driving. Like, I couldn't tell you why I would drive to barns to walk and be around horses, but this now makes sense to me, and I want to do this.
So you read Linda's book when you were, or before you got your first horse?
Funny story. Before I got my horse, I read Linda's books. I read Horses for Dummies. I read every horse book I could get my hands on. I went to horse clinics. Somebody said to me that they brought up Buck Brannaman, that they were going to go to a clinic. And I said, oh, yeah, I did go to a clinic of his years ago. And I was like, before I got Dee Dee, and they were like, you went to a horse clinic and you didn't have a horse yet? And I was like, yep.
That sounds wonderful. It sounds like any situation in which you could be in the presence of their, call it, magical nature. So when did the first horse enter your life?
All right, I'm going to back up. Let me think how to start. So I read Linda's book in 2007, and doing equine assisted coaching went on my vision board in 2007. Now, life did not go immediately down that road at all. So there was a lot of hills to climb, and years went by. And then I had met some friends who were making a documentary on homeless youth in the United States, and the documentary is called American Street Kid, and it's available on everything. But the idea was we were highlighting homeless youth in America and how there's a pipeline from foster care right into homelessness, and all these kids and the preconceived ideas people have when they see young adults on the street, what they think about them, and versus the reality of a lot of their situations. So the reason I say that is that I jumped on the team and I became a co-producer of that documentary with them. And it showed me right away that all of the romanticizing I had done about working in film was gone. I did not want to work in film. There's a lot of work. It's such a huge, huge amount of work that goes into creating anything in entertainment. So, but at the same time, I was listening to this book called You Were a Badass by Jen Sincero. And there was something about it. She is such a dork, seriously, in the best way. She would say the same thing about herself. So all of these concepts that I had been reading in books, from anywhere from Gary Zukov and Eckhart Tolle to, more business style books, to more, all of this information that I had, the intellectualized information, but it hadn't translated into taking action yet. And so this book, because she was so dorky with her jokes and the way it suddenly made it like I could do it. I could see how I was going to put all that into action. So I started. And one day I knew I had to take action. It was about taking action. And like most people who know that they have a whole other life inside them that they want to live, but have no idea how to get there. That's what I'm sitting in my apartment in Studio City. I want to work with horses, right? I want to do this work. And I don't know where to begin. I don't have a horse. I have no inroads. I have no connections. I have no way to make this happen. But I knew I had to do something that day. So I got in the car and I drove 2.5 hours to Monty Roberts Flygazup Farms, just north of Santa Barbara. And I just walked around the horses. Here I am again, walking around horses, patting noses, dream building, trying to manifest, right? And just being present. Hung out there for a couple hours, got back in my car and drove 2.5 hours home. That night, there was a kind of like a local concert, and the promoter always had some type of nonprofit that they would promote at the concert. So that was going to be, we have a nonprofit called Spare Some Change that is associated with American Street Kid. So we were the nonprofit, and it was me and the producer, Michelle. And we're sitting next to each other at this little desk, little table with all of our information on it. And she says, "What did you do today?" And I said, "Oh, well, I took a drive up to hang out with horses because," and I told her about Linda's book, and I said, "I really wanted to do this equine assisted coaching." And she looks at me and she goes, wait a minute. I think I know someone who does that. And this is a person who does not have anything to do with horses. Michelle doesn't have anything to do with horses. I'm like, what? So the person she was referring to was just on Warwick's podcast, and that's Katie Nelligan. So Michelle hooks me up with Katie Nelligan. Katie was just starting out. It was towards the beginning of her career working in equine assisted coaching. Her horse Lindsay was here. And it gets better. If you want to, like, so Katie and I talk on the phone. We're just like two peas in a pod. We talked and talked and talked. She was doing a little workshop or a little session, whatever it was. So I signed up. I wanted to experience it. Do you know where that happened? That happened where I now live. This house that I live in was the very first place I started coming for horses. And at the time, it was not a very great place. The where Lindsay had her horse was in association with Sapphire Sanctuary, which was the sanctuary that I eventually started volunteering at. And it wasn't a very nice place at the time. If you had told me one day I would live here, I would have been like, why do you hate me? But it all plays in because Katie introduced me. I worked with Katie for a little bit in the beginning. Katie introduced me to Esta, who runs Sapphire Sanctuary. I started volunteering at Sapphire. You don't have a horse, volunteering is a great way to get around horses. And I met my first horse, Dee Dee. Well, actually, she was my second horse, but that's a different story. But I met Dee Dee because Dee Dee was owned by the people who owned this property. And she had nobody really, no person, and she was sad. And we would give her carrots, and I would tell her, one day I'm going to get you out of this situation. And gosh, I think I started volunteering. All this stuff went really fast. Really fast. So once I committed to taking action, the action was crazy fast. I started volunteering in May. In November, Katie reaches out to me and says, the place is getting foreclosed on. They have 72 hours to find homes for all of the animals. Get down there. So I raced down, started making calls. I was going to get Dee Dee. I had no idea where I was going to keep her, what I was going to do, but I had made a promise. I had looked her in the eye, and I had made her a promise. And it was a crazy story because it turned out that she had already been given to somebody, but that person was taking a bunch of horses. And then I knew someone else who knew that person who advocated for me to get Dee Dee. And I did. I got Dee Dee. She was my partner in crime. She taught me so much. I loved her dearly. There is a painting of her and I in my living room. She was 26 or 27. And I think she was 30 or 31 when she couldn't lay down anymore. And we had to help her transition, which was also ended up being really beautiful. But that is how the horses came into my life in the way that I had been holding in my heart for so long.
Wow. Okay, there's a lot wrapped up in that. We just had Kate Nelligan on our show just mere weeks ago, and hearing her name pop up yet again is like, seriously? And this whole, like, I am in complete awe at the moment. Before I get into talking a bit more about Dee Dee, because I'm really curious about who she is about a horse, I'm curious, what is the difference between equine coaching and equine assisted therapy or learning?
Yeah. So equine assisted therapy typically looks like this. You have a horse handler and you have a licensed therapist. And the two work in tandem with each other. So when I was working at Passages in Malibu, I campaigned to get the role of running the equine assisted therapy department. We had people that actually brought horses in and did the work, but you needed someone to be the one to organize, to bring the clients and to write all the notes and to assist in the process. So of course I was like, me. And eventually I did get that. So that is it. If you want to do it as therapy, which would mean that if people need to use their insurance to do it, or they can use their insurance would more likely cover that. I am not a licensed therapist. So what I would be doing is equine assisted coaching. And then there's equine assisted coaching and learning. I'm not sure if there's much difference between them. I do know that there are ways in which this is a developing field. And some of the more known ways, they, in my opinion, maybe don't lean on the beauty of what the horse brings into the work with people. And I think that that's sometimes because we need to have a system, right? Like people know systems. So what am I going to do if I'm doing this work? Well, this is what you do, and this is what you do, and this is what you do. We have to have a system. And then if we have a system, we can create the system. And now I teach other people to do A, B, and C, and they do A, B, and C. But a lot of that work doesn't necessarily come from the wisdom of the horse. It's how a team building, how can you guys work together to get that horse from that side of the arena into this circle by working together, but not doing this and doing. So the horse isn't really so much involved. It's more like a partner in it as far as being able to utilize a very small portion of what the horse really could bring. So what I like to do with my clients is, of course, I have starting points, but they're not like that. Like, it's not, can you get this horse from here to there? It's more, it more challenges narratives. It's more, what are you projecting onto the horse? How do we figure that out? How do you do that in life? What are you projecting? Why is that the projection? What are you trying to protect yourself from? What are you blocking? And it always has an opening for the horses to come in. And every time I've had a huge breakthrough with anyone, it wasn't because of anything I was doing. It was because I set it up so the horse could do the work, and the horse did the work.
There's such mirrors to our soul and our every being. I find it extremely fascinating that you have not only the skill set, but the patience and the desire to ask them for their magic and ask them to help your and the horse's clients in shaping their life into what they want their life to be. I think that's such a powerful, fascinating line of work to be in. Thank you for explaining.
Well, when you think about trauma, right? When we talked about trauma a little earlier, the brain has so many ways to cope with trauma. Typically, the effects of the trauma are not the trauma because the trauma is in the past. It's how did we internalize the trauma? What did we decide about ourselves and the world that now is shaping how we show up? And it's such a cornerstone of the work I do with people is it's a complete 360, because if we're going to look at what is the vision, what is the story, what is the thing that you almost don't even allow yourself to dream, what is that thing? If we only focus on where we're going, but we don't look at what potentially holds you back from this, what comes and sabotages you, what is, what motivates you, what doesn't, what needs to get cleared out? How can we reframe? If we're only focused on the goals, we're missing half of the work, because being able to clear that is what gives you that open runway.
People, including myself, get caught up in the difficulties of so-called manifestation and, actually manifesting what we truly desire, but not realizing the months, years, decades even that it took to get us into the particular space that we're in the present moment, and thinking that manifestation just needs to be like this magic wand that gets waved in the air, and then all of a sudden, now I've manifested it because I've set my sights on the pot of gold. Whereas there's a lot, from here to that pot of gold that is, like you said, holding us back.
And that's a really good point, because it's easy to look at this stuff as a formula. It's easy to look at manifesting as a formula. Okay, I see it in my mind, and then if I do all of this work, holding the vision and doing XYZ, eventually I will get what I held in my mind. And it's way more fluid than that. How many times have you heard people say, I lost my job and it was I thought the worst thing that ever happened to me. And then I got this other gig, or I got this other career that was so much better because I thought that what I had was the best. But how can you know what you don't know? So the issue is, yes, you build the vision, you create the dream of what it is. Preparation. You prepare to be ready for that dream. You do moves, but you hold it loosely. Because life is about evolution, the evolution of your spirit. So getting that thing in the way you see it may be the worst thing that could happen to you. Because you may need to go over here And you can't know that. How could you know that? You didn't even know over here existed or was a thing. But once you're there, you go, oh, look at how this fits in. And now that I'm here, here's another complete way to make my dream bigger. Or now it looks a little different because I didn't even know that this existed. So if I had gotten the old dream, I would have cut myself short. This is so much
And
better.
I love that idea of fluidity, of this just being a fluid process. And I'm 42 years old, and it took me 42 years to just begin to get on the path of beginning to understand that. And I don't know about you, but the horses have been, I refer to them as like my guide and guru in a lot of ways, and helping me on that path and being right alongside me, both energetically and even physically, like just being in their physical presence, has been a lot about allowing me to connect in with my body, and even past traumas that have been seated in the body that I had no knowledge of. I know Warwick Schiller has talked about a lot about his past, and like he had a great childhood and this sort of thing, so he didn't really understand trauma, but he had maybe some like health issues as a child. And even like I was a preemie, so I was like 2.5 months premature, and that's very traumatic in the sense. And where does that go? Well, it goes somewhere in the body. And I just love the idea of being fluid with it and being able to see things in the present moment. And there's a lot that, I don't know, comes from that. I think, Alyssa, you have something else to piggyback on there.
My goodness, yeah, that's a lot. I feel what you're saying on like both a personal and a spiritual level, and it's like a sort of sense of like the trauma that has come into, and we've talked to a few other guests on the podcast here that have expressed how going through a crazy traumatic moment or moments in their life have led them back to the presence and the spirituality and the help of horses. And I know that's been true for me. How about for you?
Oh, absolutely. It's, one of the things that I talked with Warwick about when we were on the podcast was the idea that all these things that I had been moving towards with no real clear idea of how they'd come together only made sense years later, looking back and going, oh, no wonder I was going and finding horse stables to hang out at when I was at my lowest. No wonder, like, this actually makes sense now. So I do want to say that, Jason, when you were talking about that idea about childhood, I think one of the things that Warwick and jokes about now is that he and Robin both, we had great childhoods. That's what we thought. We had great childhoods, right? And it's not to say that they were overly traumatic or whatever, but I think the idea is the thing about your childhood, it's never about blaming your parents. It's not about blame. It's about how did your childhood shape how you respond and show up in the world, how you see things, because our childhoods are normalized because we can't have two childhoods to compare. We only get one. And the things that happen in our family, we might think they're a little different, or they might even seem a lot different, but we don't even have we don't really have a way to compare them. So let's say that they're dysfunctional. Well, we might see the big dysfunctional pieces. Oh, this is, maybe there's addiction, maybe there's violence, so we see those because we can go, oh, I don't think that's normal. But what we might not see is the manipulative communication, the Game of Thrones style power games that are happening within the family, these other things and I think as you go through life and you get older and older and you have more and more experiences too, you get to use that lens to look back and go, oh, wow, this was so normal. I never even thought this was a thing until now that I look at it with my adult eyes and look back and go, yeah, no wonder I have trouble trusting people, because look at how this played out in my family. Look how there always had to be somebody everybody jumped on, right? Or look how there had to always be a good guy and bad guy in every situation. Look how there's so many different possibilities. So this process is a lifelong process. It's so fun. It's so fun to play the game of, how did I learn to think that way? Why do I look at that? Where did that thought come from? Do I want to keep that one? Does it work? Do I want to change it? Like, whoa. It's fun.
So fun. And it ties into the idea that everything happens for a reason, and our experiences are our experiences alone. And there's no one else in this world that's going to experience everything that we've experienced in this lifetime just by virtue of not being us. And I think that ties in so nicely with what you're saying, and it resonates with me in so many ways, because the idea of healing through past traumas and recognizing these points in my life that have shifted largely because of the help of the horses, but also coming into the realization that it's like it had to happen for a reason. Like, I wouldn't be where I am right now if it wasn't for those experiences, even if in that moment those experiences were terrible.
Yeah, were you on that call, the Zoom call the other day?
I wasn't.
So
Yeah.
So one of the things that came up, which was that, and I don't know, I guess you know a little bit if you listen to the Warwick podcast, but I ended up with a much older man when I was a teenager who was basically a criminal, and I ended up in jail at 23 years old, facing like, I don't know, 20 something felonies and 30 years in jail. And I had a cellmate when I was in Lehigh County, because I was denied bail. So that's why I was in jail awaiting trial. So I had a cellmate who was a heroin addict prostitute, who was one of the wisest humans and most kind humans I had ever met. And in her wiseness, she said, you might want to go to the group therapy sessions that they have here. And I was like, oh, sure, I'll do that. And those women handed me my ass. I was 16 when I met my ex. He was 34. And I was a child like I felt like a child and I behaved like a child in the sense of giving all of my power away to someone else. And I'm sure that he was definitely a father figure in ways for me. But I remember they basically told me that they did not care how old I was. I made choices that led to me to be where I was. And I'll tell you, that was like that slap across the face that wakes you up. Like you were in some kind of dream, and all of a sudden, like, you're wide awake. And it was this accountability for my actions. Who cares if you were 16 and underage? Like, it's still you. And look, here you are living out the consequences. It's not about it wasn't about making me wrong or bad or anything that it was making me accountable. Be accountable. And I remember being on the phone, the payphone in the jail, to my grandmother. And I just remember being so excited to tell her what happened. And that I said to her, I think that being arrested, this was like horrible, but this might be the best thing that ever happened to me. Because I have realized something. I know I had this major shift in the way I see myself and the way I see the world. And I don't know if that would have happened without something this huge happening, this scary happening for me to get to this place. Because I know, Jason, you said you're 42, I think, and you're just getting, most people never get here. So don't ever think about how old you are. Think about, thank goodness I'm here now.
I love that idea. I just I sat with that a lot this morning. In fact, just the gratitude of where I'm at, and even over the past 14 months of my life has been nothing short of an amazing transformation. And it brings to mind, have you read, I think I just pulled it up because I couldn't remember his name off the top of my head, but Mark Wolynn, I think it is. Wolynn, Wollynn, Mark Wolynn's book. It's called It Didn't Wait. And so he's a psychologist that wrote a book about how a lot of our traumas aren't even the traumas that we experience in this lifetime. Like they actually, and I guess you could take it from prior lifetimes if you believe that. I do believe in, we were here, a time or two before, or many times before. But even if you don't take it from that perspective, a lot of his teaching is based on what is actually coming through based on prior generations. And I find that kind of stuff fascinating because we don't really even know what we bring with us into this life, or what the energy that we're being born into brings in. And then we all start in different playing fields, so to speak, of this thing we call life.
But that's beautiful, because that's why this work is so important. Because when you wake up, when you get that slap across the face, right? When you suddenly wake up from the dream and go, oh, now you get to change that generational trauma. Now you're not unconscious anymore. And the benefit of that is not just for you, but for every person that is affected by you, that is in your circle, reaps the benefits of that.
Yeah, and it's like the ripple effects of that are endless. I mean, Alyssa and I have talked a lot about, and we get a lot of comments, positive comments about our relationship and our ability to host a podcast together and that sort of thing. And I look back on my own life and think about like it was a dream of mine to have this sort of connection with my children, you know, at some point in time. And wow, it's just I don't know where I'm getting at with that, but do you feel there's ever like a sort of time where you're being too vulnerable, you're being too open, you're being too willing and able to share these things that are ultimately like a cause for great change for people, whether inside your family or out?
So, do you mean when you say share these things, do you mean the stories or?
Yeah, the stories and the dialogue and the things that we tell ourselves about how we washed up on the shore that we're actually on at the present moment. And you know, do you ever feel, because in the work that you do and definitely like it seems like allowing the horses to come into the spaces and working with your clients and stuff like that, I guess what I'm trying to ask, like you're asking people to be vulnerable, so you've got to have it about yourself. You've been very vulnerable with us already. Do you ever feel like you have like kind of buyer's remorse after, or vulnerability remorse?
Oh,
Yeah.
God, yes. Oh, well, less and less. But in the beginning, when I did a podcast, I needed to lay down. Like I was done for the day. And sometimes the second day, the hangover was intense. When I was on Lynn Carnes' podcast, and that was the first time I probably went in depth about everything that led up to being arrested and all of that stuff. And I immediately called her the next day and said, I don't know if I want you to put that out. Like, I don't know if I'm freaking out. And she was so kind. And, oh, we don't have to do that. We don't have to put it. You know, I'll just sit on it and you just let me know and take your time. And so at least I had that ability. And I think it was probably within a week I said, okay. And her daughter came back. Her daughter's the one that Jen, her daughter, does all of the technical stuff, right? So she had reached out after she listened to it with a bunch of like positive things. And I thought, okay, well, all right, well, maybe I should then put this out. I think that where the line my whole reasoning behind sharing it is to help people overcome their yeah buts. You know, the yeah, but yeah, you did that. Yeah, but I'm living in this state, or yeah, but I'm not as tall as you, right? I don't have the exact road that you were on. Everyone's got a yeah, but where they try to go, my story's different. And the reason why I tell my story is because it is kind of shocking. And I want to be able to trump some of those yeah buts. Like, my family watched me get arrested on national television. Like, no. I with a record. I was on welfare. I had 2 children, just to get by. Like, I could tell you, digging change out of the couch cushions to get 29-cent hamburgers at McDonald's, at some points. There is no yeah, but. And there are people that have, even in different ways, bigger things, maybe medical things or physical things, or, through. The thing is that it's endless. It's endless, the things that we need to overcome. They're always going to be there at different levels. It's, are you in the game or are you watching? And which one do you want to do? Do you want to be a spectator to your life, or do you want to be tap me in?
Incredibly profound there. Like, that hits me in so many ways. And what I ultimately hear you saying is there could be plenty of rather blaming another individual or a situation for what we've gone through as humans in this life, but instead taking the initiative and the accountability and standing up for those, albeit wrong decisions that we've made as an individual, and recognizing that no matter the age, no matter the situation, we had choices and we learn from those choices, whether they be good or bad. It's powerful. So that leads me to another question to ask. When you were interacting with horses, when you were in your darkest times versus interacting with horses today, do you see a difference in how they, like, on average, react to your energy just by virtue of you being this, you're being able to take initiative, take accountability for your own self now versus before?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that when I was going to the barns, when I was completely lost, I didn't know what the answers were. I didn't have a really good understanding of horses in the sense of the way horses communicate and the way they are. And I feel like there was a lot of need in me that I didn't know what to do with, and they certainly didn't know what to do with. Whereas the thing that I really wanted to do, and I want to say this because when I started volunteering, I was in my late 40s. And of course, the voice is like, I mean, you're in your late 40s. You're just starting. You have so far to go. You don't even know this and you don't even know that. And I'm there going, well, I know everything about dogs and what their body language is. And I would ask a million questions. What does it mean when they do that with their ears? What does it mean when they do that with their tail? What does it mean when they're doing, I wanted to be able to read and communicate. And I had to tell myself that I could look at it like it's a little late to start and not start, but the years are going to go by. And 5-10 years from now, am I going to be someone who wishes I started 5-10 years ago? Or am I going to be someone who has 5-10 years in and discovering all these things? I learned how to be around horses by being around horses. Nothing takes the place of time and practice and learning. I learned from as many people as I could some people were more my style, more what I was looking for than others. I think I still learned from everybody, even if it was just that's not what I want to do. So I think now my communication with horses is more organic, mutual, and more of a mutual. Like I don't need anything. If you want to go over there, I'm not like go over there. I'm not like no, Golly, you rejected me. Come back. You can go over there. You can go over there. I'll hold space for that. Everything is perfect. Everything is perfect.
Goes back to allowing them to be the sovereign beings that they are, just as they allow you to be the sovereign being that you are.
Exactly.
In their presence.
Exactly. I love that. You are such a beautiful old soul, Alyssa. Oh my goodness.
I tell her that quite often. As her dad, I like look at her a lot and just like, you're such an old soul. I'm like, I get a lot of wisdom that flows from this girl, and I know we continue to learn from each other. And well, these horses have just, I'm still blown away by the path of the horse and and what they have helped us accomplish and to begin to understand in our own lives. After having gone through everything that you've gone through, what message do you ultimately want to tell people about where they're at and how, like those buts, like.
Yeah, I think a lot of times people don't start because they think they have to get rid of something before they move forward. You can be full of buts and still take action. You can be unsure and still take action. You cannot know what the right action is to take and still take action. Some of the biggest leapfrogging moments have come from me taking random action that I could not see how this particular action was going to lead me to anything that I wanted or desired, and it did. Taking action trumps everything. It's just like that idea, persistence beats resistance. Be persistent. You don't have to know all the answers. How could you, especially if you're starting out? I don't think if I live to be 90, I don't think that I'll ever consider myself an expert in horses. I feel like a beginner every day. I feel like I haven't even scratched the surface. I don't know anything. All I do is follow in flow the best to my ability.
These beings, which we call horses, are like master energy workers, master yoga masters, master teachers in wisdom and so much more. And I feel you where you're in the state where you're constantly learning from them and you're constantly a beginner with them. Is like, I feel that every day when we walk in with R3, and it's like sometimes one of them will give us like the smallest little shift in her face, and it's like, oh, what's going on? What is that face? What are you curious about? Versus maybe what we'd see as the usual was just, oh, I'm hungry. That's a clear face of I'm hungry. But this time it's a little different. And they're constantly teaching and learning alongside us. And I think that that's been the hugest accomplishment that I've noticed with the horses is being able to walk alongside them and learn from and with them as we learn in this life. I'm curious. I want to know a little bit more about your horse, Dee Dee.
Oh, yeah, Dee Dee. Oh, my gosh. So Dee Dee was a red roan varnish Appaloosa. And she had anxiety, and I had to learn about energies. I had to learn about how can I use my energy to make her less anxious. And, I did the best that I could at the time because I was new. And I think that's one thing about being on this path of evolution and growing and always learning is that you have to know that you can't judge your past by what you know now. If I knew what I knew now and I went back to when I first got DD, I'd have a million more tools in my toolkit. I would have had so much more available to me to have helped her. I did my very best, and she and I had a beautiful connection. I wasn't able to really help her as much as I maybe could have with her anxiety. I don't know. Maybe I couldn't. I don't know. But I think that sometimes people hold back from learning an expansive way of being different. I would raise my kids differently. I mean, I know more now. And sometimes that can be painful for people. And they resist it because they're so afraid of what it might mean about them. So if I allow myself to understand horses in a different way, in a more connection-based way, in a more partnership as opposed to top-down relationship, if I get rid of these little boxes that I can put a horse in, like stubborn, lazy, any of these things, when I don't have, really it's because I don't have the answer and I feel like I should have the answer. So I need to put them in this, and then I deal with them from that box. If I learn another way and I have to look back and see that that was really unkind or not really a partnership that I thought I was having, that might challenge who I see myself as. That might be such a challenge to my identity. I don't know if I can handle that. So now I have to be on the other side and fight for my limiting way of being with horses. Has to be right, because if it's not right, I'm the bad guy. And that's one of the things that I try to encourage people when they say, what do I do when I'm around people who are not being kind to horses or being this, heavy-handed way? And I have that around me. And the thing is that nobody it opens their heart and mind when it comes from judgment. But if you demonstrate by your relationship, and this is where I have a lot of clients with horses, and a lot of clients that are following this new way of being with horses that's spreading. And they're telling me about situations where people are going, how are you doing that? Or I can't believe you did that, where they might have in the beginning watching them going, what the hell are you doing? You got to make them do this, or you got to move their feet, or whatever the saying is. But by demonstrating it, you create space for people to ask questions. If you're non-judgment and you just stay the course, then people are able to lean in. Judging and complaining. If it worked, great. The problem is it's moving you away from what you want. What you want is to see more people treating their horses well. You indulging your emotional reaction to seeing it not go well actually drives it further over there, because now that person has to plant their flag in what they're doing to defend themselves. And they're not open now to hearing other ways of being, because that's going to challenge it. Does that make sense?
It does. It makes so much sense. And there's so many timely synchronicities in that message for me. And I think Dad and I collectively, like, this has been coming up a lot in our personal conversations, and seeing as, especially in the horse world, I know what happens with dogs, it happens with cats, it happens with humans, but there's so many instances in the horse world where it seems like a horse is being looked down upon, a horse is being treated wrong, and then it's like that mindset of being open to asking questions and learning about why this is being done. It comes from a lot more of a loving perspective than a judgmental perspective. It's such a beautiful way of viewing other aspects of being.
It doesn't work. Like, that's at the end of the day, the judgmental way, it typically doesn't work. So we're not getting we're not bringing more into the world of what we really want. And now I will say that that's not to say if I saw somebody physically beating a horse or doing that, I wouldn't be shouting from the, like, intervene as much as I possibly could and try to, sometimes people need to see themselves through someone else's eyes.
For sure.
To realize, like, oh, wow, I look like a monster right now. Maybe that could be a wake-up call. But that's typically not what we see. We see other things that are more normalized and harsh. And
oftentimes people don't know. It seems like a lot of these people that are, I mean, I have more experience, I guess, more like I've done more reading into and hanging out like in the horse realm rather than, say, dogs or cats. But it seems like largely when people are interacting with them, they are unaware of their, quote, negative actions toward them. They just don't know. It comes from a space of lack of knowing and lack of being taught how to listen to the animals rather than ill intent.
I was talking to Jessica White Plume recently, and she said something that was just so profound, which was, she was talking about her friend's horse, and she said, and he's, you're talking about my family when you talk about that horse. That horse's family, the animal family, that this is all part of our family. And the way she said it was so natural. And there was a different energy around. I know we talk about like our fur babies and stuff like that, but it was a different energy. It wasn't an infantilizing energy. Like, it wasn't childlike, infantilizing the animal. It was like equal. This is an equal member of my family.
I have been so drawn into that emotion here recently. I mean, a little bit about our situation, and kind of like, I think Alyssa's talked to you a bit about it. And like, this plays into like my but in my own storyline. Like, half a decade ago, I bought a piece of property with somebody who I broke up with this past August. August 2023 after building from scratch and bringing all these animals onto this farm that we were building and the horses. And out of all the animals, I've had to say goodbye to a lot of them because in the breakup, she took a lot of the animals with her and such. But out of all the animals, like the 3 horses that we have on our property have become so family to me. And half a decade ago, I would have never entertained the idea. Even a dog or cat to me then was I had more of a crass sort of hardened attitude even to that. I would, well, it's just a dog, it's just a cat. I had no knowledge of horses. There's something about the horse, at least for me personally, that once I was willing and able to show up and open up and allow myself to be vulnerable to that experience, that energetic experience in that opening, well, we became family as if that relationship was birthed into existence. And it's interesting you mentioned that because I'm sitting here at this kind of crossroads in my life where there's a lot going on, and I've had family members like tell me recently, well, why don't you just rehome the horses? And I I can empathize with that notion, but it would be the equivalent of me just, well, why don't I just rehome Alyssa? Like if she wasn't able to take care of herself, and just like, okay, well, why don't I just like find somebody that could take care of her?
Mm-hmm.
It's that deep for me. But yeah, so it's really interesting to me that you bring up that family tie. And is it horses for everybody? No, but I think for those of us and the people that will actually listen to Reinforce the Horse, I think they get the idea that these horses have such an integral part of our energetic space, and then they become such an integral part of our life.
Very true. Very true. And I think sometimes we can get very stuck on having to figure out a problem on our own. And sometimes the answer is to actually, when we talk about being vulnerable, look for help. Ask other people. Put it out there of, it's like that Rumi quote, what you seek is seeking you. What other people would love to partner with you or have space for you or would want to buy into your property? I don't know the specifics, but sometimes it's thinking outside of the box of, of what everyone else is doing, but all the best things that happen are collaborative.
That's a huge point. And my goodness, you just keep bringing up like life synchronicities here. It's quite profound, like your energy and the way your experience and the way that you can express these profound topics is so beautiful. Like asking for help is a huge one that I'm learning. I mean, I'm 18 years old and have had 2 major instances now where I've been like, the universe is like, you're gonna ask for help, and like you're gonna do it. You're not gonna say no, you're just gonna do it. And it's a very vulnerable place for maybe every human to be in. But I know for me, like it can be so complicated at times. But then that's where the yeah, but for me comes up is like, I just need to own that vulnerability, that discomfort, and use the help and the support that I have around me, whether that be in the form of people from the podcast or family members or the animals, the horses, friends, or whatever it may be. Thank you for bringing that up. That's like clarity in so many ways.
One of the most, I would say one of the biggest examples of vulnerability I experienced was when I did work in addiction. Because one thing that you realize when people go to treatment, when they go to a residential facility, typically they have spent their whole life trying to hide their issue or convince people that what they were saying was not a problem. And now, not only do they have to admit it, but they're going to travel and live amongst strangers while delving into their deepest, darkest fears and insecurities. And that has to be one of the bravest things a human can do, is ask for help and be willing to do something like that. I mean, how many of us would be willing to do something like that? The woman who wrote Dopamine Nation said that she believed people in recovery were the prophets of our time. Because the thing about recovery is every day you are taking stock. What am I thinking? Where are my thoughts going? How am I showing up? How am I being to other people? Every day. How many of us do that every day? And it was working there that I realized that we're all the same. The only difference between people who struggle with addiction and someone who doesn't is that one person picked a way to cope with a lack of belonging, a lack of purpose, a lack of connection, and a lack of meaning, with using something that is detrimental to themselves and to the pursuit of all those things. The other person, they've got their coping mechanisms, but it could be a million other things. But this one actually works against you in a way that takes you down and the people around you. So being able to do that, and then taking that model into the general world and go, okay, this is what we're all humans want these basic things. And anybody that thinks quitting a coping mechanism like addiction, I would challenge to just do some, quit sugar, quit coffee. Pick something and just see how hard that is to do. We all have our things we lean on.
Yeah, I appreciate that insight. And I know we could go on a total another discussion about that whole topic. There's so much in that, and as it relates to the horses as well. I'm reminded of something. So I went through a course, Alyssa and I both have. It's a yoga course by the yogi mystic Sadhguru, and it's called Inner Engineering. And one of the core tenets of the Inner Engineering course is that I am responsible for everything. And upon first hearing that, I was like, I'm responsible for everything. Like, how can I be responsible for everything? The way it has embodied itself within me and my understanding is that it's not that I'm pointing fault at myself, that I need to be behind bars, particular action or inaction. It's just that I am responsible for how I choose to move throughout this life at any given moment. And by knowing and acknowledging that choice, then I'm able to move much more freely and fluidly. And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but people who are suffering from addiction of any sort, they haven't yet or been able to acknowledge that very thing. And so they've kind of stripped themselves of their ability to choose. And I don't know, it just kind of brought that to mind for me.
I will say that the things that lead to addiction are as varied as there are people. Obviously, becoming accountable, which it sounds like is what you're leaning towards, is the accountability, is necessary. No matter, I have heard stories that I wish I could expunge from my brain. You hear things that are so sad and traumatizing that people have experienced. And sometimes people, start drinking heavily at night because of the things that happen to them in the middle of the night. And now they can't go to sleep at night without drinking until they pass out, because going to bed is associated with trauma. Somebody else, it could be social anxiety caused them to start drinking, and then they leaned on it more and more and more. And then the anxiety gets worse and worse. And now we feel trapped and we are disgusted with ourselves. And, it could go down that route. There's so many different ways it could go, but without accountability, you can both acknowledge trauma and feel for the person and hold them in their highest regard, that they are capable of getting past the ways that they're taking themselves down, that they can find their way out of the darkness. And that's I think that one of the things that I really wanted to do in my work was to be able to have ways of helping people do that other than just talking, right? Talking is amazing. Having, activities that you do to support that is great. But being able to bring hypnotherapy and IEMT into the mix is like when you talk about the internal engineering, because now we're tapping in to those neural pathways. We're able to tap into that subconscious mind that are making choices that aren't choices that you would choose. We're able to tap into the blocks and shift and change them. So at the same time as you're moving forward, you're dropping weight as well of these things that might be a drag. It's like, my brain just jumped 50 feet ahead, but it was this analogy about and we're back to where we started, which is you're Your mess is your message. Your story is your greatest superpower. And we tend to feel like our story is the anchor that we're dragging behind us. But it's actually the sail.
Gosh, it's just those moments, And yeah, there's a lot of a lot of energy in that. God, just feeling that for a moment, just that everything you just said. Um, I love it. I'm kind of speechless at the moment.
And it's still happening because we're still alive. The story's still being written. It's still going.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And like one thing over the past year of my life that I'm just in awe of is the fact that like it's 2024 and I don't know about you, but I was never given a user manual for this thing called life. Not to mention one for raising children or horses or any of that. And I too found myself in like just compulsive reaction about anything and everything that comes down the pipeline. That was exasperated by military service on a lot of levels, and then subsequently a cancer diagnosis, and and then all these like crossroads that pop up. But the the best thing, and again, to draw it back to the horses, I think a lot of people could listen, like non-horse people, so to speak, could listen to this podcast and say like, Jason, it sounds like you're addicted to horses. And in some ways there's I suppose there would be some validity to that. It's not that I'm addicted to or worship a horse. It's that the horse has been a portal for my own understanding about myself and who I am. And it sounds like you've had a lot of experiences in that way, and just the people that you've worked with. I'm just so in awe of like the work and your own story, and bringing your mess as your message, and letting that story be your sail. And I just thank you so much for what you've shared with us. And
Yeah, I'll piggyback on that and say thank you so much for spending this time with us, for sharing your story with us. I'm quite speechless. You have so much wisdom and so much power in your being. It's just been such a beautiful time sharing this space with you.
Well, I would like to say thank you to both of you for inviting me on and sharing so much of your story and allowing these kind of conversations, bringing these kind of conversations into the world, because I love them. I love listening to them. I think that we all need to feel inspired. And there's nothing more inspirational than hearing other people's stories and saying, yeah, me too, and seeing somebody else go through things and feeling around in the dark, which is what so much of life can feel like at times, but having the courage to just keep going. And I know it sounds like you guys are right in the middle of a feeling around in the dark moment, but I guarantee that it's part of the continued story that you're going to have in hindsight, you're going to be talking about this very moment in your life. In the future, you're going to be talking about what led to what and how that led to this and that and what you learned. And that's just a whole perspective that changes the way we look at these things as, going from that happening to me versus happening for me.
I feel that so strongly. And man, do I appreciate your wisdom and your peace and knowing about you with and through and for this conversation and for us collectively. Is there anything further that you'd like to share with our listeners today?
I had just spoke to somebody. I had a client this morning, and this is a client I've worked with for quite a while. And she is just a dream client. Like, she just takes and runs with everything and brings great stuff to our work. And we were talking about you have to be committed. You have to make the commitment to yourself. And it's funny, the ways in which society has acceptable ways of committing to yourself and outlier ways of committing to yourself. So if you were to say to somebody, I'm going to spend, I don't know, $15,000 in the next 3 months on creating my vision and putting my work together of what I'm going to do and working on my relationships and building a platform that I can jump my life off of. Most people would be very skeptical and fearful of that. But if you told people, I'm going to spend $80,000 and go back to school and get X degree with no guarantee that that's going to do anything, you'd be applauded. People are terrified of the idea of actually investing in themselves as a person. And maybe you do invest in yourself as a person, go out and go get another degree, because that becomes part of the vision of what you want to create. But it's very much like this passive, almost lazy, I don't want to actually build me. What can I do instead? Oh, well, if I have that degree, maybe then I'll be a real boy, maybe then I'll be a fully formed human. But there's no getting around the work. And so I would suggest start where you can. Start with what you can do. Start looking at start putting it together. Start taking action. That would be my biggest thing that I would like to leave people with is take action, because you know who the hardest clients are the ones that read all the books. They know all the lingo, been there, done that, right? You're laughing because right? Because they intellectualized it all. And then they go, it doesn't work. Well, tell me what you did. Well, I did this for a week, or you were never committed. It's not, let me try this and see. It's, let me jump off this friggin' bridge. I'm going to swim. I'm going to go. there's no going back. There's no back. There's only forward. And some people want to put their foot in the water and go, and I want to know what happens 2 years from now if I put my foot in the water like this.
That is incredibly powerful and profound and timely. Again, there's been so much of this that we've talked about recently. Thank you so much for sharing your insight with us. Speaks to me in so many ways, and I do believe it'll speak to so many listeners out there. This time has been absolutely incredible with you. I'm so grateful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And for our listeners, we'll definitely put links, as we always do, out on the show notes page. But Christine, is there like one place that you would like to send people to, maybe a website that people could connect with you?
So I'll give you my website and my email address. And then, of course, it's easy to find me through social media, but my website is onthepathcoaching.net. And my email address is onthepathCHT, which stands for clinical hypnotherapist. It's a very old one, but onthepathCHT@gmail.com. And if anybody has any questions or anything, you could always email me.
Very cool. And like I said, we'll definitely put links out, and so people could find those links and connect with you if they see fit. And are you taking new clients at the moment?
Yes. It's so funny. I've had clients reach out to me and say, I didn't think you would respond to me. And I always laugh and go, I work with people, right? Like, it takes people. Like, yeah, even the worst that could happen is there's a waiting period. Like, I can start with somebody in a couple of weeks or something, or a month, but there's yes. And there's different ways that, right now I am offering to work with people with just IEMT. And then I also do intensive, which is virtual intensives or in-person intensives at my ranch in Los Angeles over the weekends. And then we do retreats, retreat in Bali in January. It's phenomenal with Kathy Price, the two of us, and we're going to probably do like a Q&A explanation of everything video soon. And I'm working on stuff with other people that you would probably know their names, but I'll wait. But lots of stuff happening, because you know what? This is my dream life, is doing this with these people. So the idea that I get to experience watching other people grow and change and grow into their ideal life while I'm creating my own ideal life is probably the greatest gift ever.
Yeah, that's fascinating. It's taken me a while to get there, but I'm feeling on that path as well, and it's just a great place and way to be. Again, thank you so much, and to all our listeners, thank you for listening to another episode of Reinforce the Horse.
Yes, thank you so much. And thank you, Christine, for your time. We loved this conversation.
My pleasure.